It's tough. I mean, they mentioned Regis Prograis too. A guy that guy's the boogeyman, Rougarou. Javier Fortuna was calling himself that, but it's like nobody wants to mention Regis.
He got knocked out by Reese Burgers.
He's a beast. Gave Josh Taylor hell and has looked great, ever since. So that's a guy I want to see get a big fight. So obviously it's tough to imagine Ryan Garcia jumping right into that one, but I mean, a hell of a fight on paper too. So, and I know it's one of the ones that was thrown in the graphic a couple times with DAZN. It's like, we're going to throw him in there because he needs to be mentioned, but in reality, we don't think that one's going to happen. Sebastian, I see you smiling. So I think you probably agree with that.
Yeah, completely. He's not ready for that.
Welcome back to the RBR Recap, episode 25. I am Alex Burgos, joined as always by my co-host Gabe Rivas and a very special guest today, DAZN's Sebastian Milo, back for a second time joining us here. And we appreciate you joining us after a big night, Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. Got a lot to talk about that, but first, want to kick it to you guys. Sebastian, how are you doing, sir?
Doing well. Happy to be back, and after a great night, just happy to be here.
Great. Gabe, I know you're on your third cup of coffee already. It's very early in the morning where you are.
Trying to wake up.
Yeah. How are you?
Good, man. Good, man. It was a good fight week experience, just waiting and fight night for me. But, fun and ready to go.
Nice. You guys are living the life, and we definitely have some stuff to talk about. That was the one thing going in last night. I was like, I hope, whatever happens, that there's something, nice to discuss. And by all means, Ryan Garcia delivered that. So I'll jump right in. Garcia moves himself to 23-0 with 19 knockouts. Really a dominant performance, I thought, against Javier Fortuna. A guy just maybe right off the back end of, being in his prime. I mean, he's not super old. I think he's 33. Is still competitive with most guys. Most guys talked a good game going in, excuse me. And I think, expected fireworks. But I thought very early on, we saw that he was a little bit tentative. It lets us know that Ryan Garcia is not a slouch. He's doing things in there that's really, getting the opponent's attention and really keeping them at bay. And you can't just go in there, start winging shots. And Ryan Garcia looked more like his old self in this fight than in the Emmanuel To-Go fight. It looks like things are coming along nicely with his new trainer, Joe Goosen. A 6th-round stoppage, and a lot of what people, went to social media and everything talking about after is kind of the things that Ryan not only did in the fight, 3 knockdowns, but also what he said after. And so the fight that's been sizzling, been bubbling, and things that people want to talk about are obviously the Gervonta Tank Davis fight. There's cross-promotional issues there, but that's the one. Mannix talked about it. Everyone after, that's the one. But he also kind of Ryan Garcia threw another fun name in the hat in Teofimo Lopez too. So what I want to do first, Sebastian, I'm gonna kick it to you. What did you think of his performance, just overall, and the expectations going in? Because this is, if not one, maybe 1A of the best opponents that he's faced, alongside, I would say, Luke Campbell.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of pressure on Ryan Garcia's back going into this, especially considering his last performance, which was a little bit subpar to what he usually does. It was a lackluster performance, in all honesty. And this time around, he thoroughly impressed me. I think he thoroughly impressed everyone in the boxing community with his performance and that growth from a fight that only happened a couple of months ago to now. Garcia really, he did his part this weekend. He dismantled a former champion. That's never a joke, no matter how old he is or what part of his career he's in. And dropped him 3 times, knocked him out 27 seconds into the 6th round. And not just that, he controlled every second, every minute of that fight. And he showed a well-educated and a little bit more of an improved version, a patient version of Ryan Garcia, which I really liked.
Definitely. Gabe, what did you think? I mean, it's always tough, because the expectations are so high on Ryan Garcia. And even you see when he does so well, people are still going to find something negative to say. But I thought, if he could maybe pre-fight think, okay, what can I do to really appease the fans? Like, this was exactly what he needed. What do you think?
Yeah, I've always believed in Ryan Garcia. I've always been a fan of his. And during the past few months, it's been harder to justify why, because of the time away from the ring, because of his performance against Emmanuel To-Go. But this recent performance makes it easy again to say, okay, look, he is a top talent with a bright future. He is serious about the sport. and he is a legitimate threat at 135 pounds. And the to-go fight, I think one element that made it very difficult for him to look good is that to-go didn't really show up to fight. I think as soon as he felt the power, he was on survival mode for the rest of the fight. And it's really hard to knock somebody out when they're moving so much. Fortuna, however, he came here to fight. And especially in the beginning of the fight, when he was, landing some punches with a little bit more frequency, towards the end, he was on survival mode, but he was still willing to exchange. Like, for instance, in the second round, the second knockdown, which I believe took place in the 5th round, where Ryan Garcia threw a light right hand followed by a hook. Fortuna was trying to counter that punch, and that's why he got caught. And the counter indicates to me that he's still trying to catch Ryan Garcia with punches, even though he's got some heavy firepower going his way. So he was there to fight. I mean, there are some few factors that we got to keep in mind. It was at 140 pounds. According to various, news outlets, that was per the request of Fortuna's manager. Fair enough. But, I mean, he was a champion at 126. I think it was an interim belt champion at 130. That's where he was at his prime, Javier Fortuna. This is 140 pounds, 10 pounds above that. So you got to take that into consideration when looking at the performance of Ryan Garcia. Not to take anything away, though, because he looked great. Quick jabs, quick right hands, and showed improvements. The straight left or the overhand left that knocked him down in the Campbell fight, every time Fortuna would throw it, he'd put his hand up almost as if to say, that's not catching me anymore. Right. You know what I mean? And then obviously he looked good with the speed in his right hands. And also when he threw the right hand, he wouldn't get off balance like he would do in previous fights. He would throw the right hands, he would launch himself, and then he'd smother himself. With this one, he'd throw the right hand, but just to keep him at the end of his punch, keep him honest, and to hurt him, when necessary. So lots of improvements, and it's a lot easier to say, hey, Ryan Garcia is a top talent, and he's a threat at 135 pounds.
You could see Fortuna, was a little soft around the sides and maybe a little bit too many plátanos. But I'm not mad.
Phrase thick.
Yeah, that boy thick. But yeah, I feel him too. The plátanos are good. So but he didn't look that bad. And you're right. There were spots where he was trying to do, and Ryan mentioned that as well in the post fight, spots that he could tell he was trying to do what Luke Campbell did with that, return firepower. So if you could maybe nitpick, there's one thing that I still don't like that he does occasionally, and I think a higher level fighter will maybe take advantage is, he pulls straight back a lot of times, Ryan. And it's almost like when he's using the Cobra bag, obviously he's, posted 1,000 of those videos, but it's like he fires the 1-2 or the 1-2-3, and then he just falls straight back, and he's super quick in doing it. But man, that's one thing you just gotta, move laterally, like, because eventually, and he's been caught before doing it, and sometimes if you do get caught right on the button, you're not getting back up. So obviously we could pick at different things, but overall the package is more refined. Definitely, Sebastian, to what you mentioned in the to-go fight, he looks a lot more like the guy, Gabe, you mentioned, that you can get behind. Not only does he have the out of ring star power, but now what we want to see is in the ring. And I'll even mention this seemed more like a comparable Gervonta Davis event fight. At Crypto, you got the Rams there, you got Michael B. Jordan, you got all these personalities coming to see him, and guess what? He delivered, just like Tank did in his last fight and when he packs out these houses. So if you could really, start to think, if this fight could happen, if they can make it behind the scenes, it seems like the stuff up front is making sense. And, I tried to think back, obviously this day and age is tough because we don't see these big fights when the guys are young as much. But man, in like Oscar De La Hoya's day, man, this wouldn't have been so far-fetched. He probably would have, stepped up and fought a couple of these guys. I remember seeing even his like interim fights or his fights in between the huge fights. I mean, they were still tough fights against guys, like Obakar and stuff like that. I mean, Oscar had, for as much, grief he gets as a promoter, man, he fought everybody. And I could hope, that Ryan is going to, push towards that more. And I mean, no time like the present, at least for us. So I do want to ask you guys, now post-fight, and he's talking about Tank and, Teofimo and things like that. Sebastian, if you had your choice, who would the guy be, and how does the fight play out for Ryan Garcia?
Well, like you said, and like how we saw yesterday, the all-star power that Ryan Garcia brings to the table, and the celebrities, the talent that walk into that arena, and just, even how he transcends the sport of boxing, I think the other one who does that is Tank Davis. And making that fight happen would be something truly special for boxing, for both of these fighters as individuals. And I think that's just the best fight to make, especially since he did say he doesn't want to go back down to 135. They'd be willing to fight at 140. I think that makes it a little bit easier to make. Politics aside, promotional issues aside, I think that's the fight to make, though.
How does it go?
Right now, I still think Ryan, while he has made a lot of improvements, he still needs to refine himself a little bit more, improve in some areas, like you said, when he pulls back, keeps his head up. So I would give Tank the edge at this point if they were to fight at 140.
I think that's fair. Yeah, a lot of people kind of mimic that as well. You would assume it'd be a close fight, a good fight, but maybe Tank by a little bit right now. Gabe, what do you think?
Given that he said that he wants to move up to 140 pounds, I mean, it's a tough question to ask. And then what hat am I putting on? Am I putting the promoter hat, or am I putting the hat of a fan that really wants to see the best fights happen? If I put on my promoter hat, I think he has a lot of unfinished business at 135 pounds. Post-fight, he did say he wants to stay at 140, but maybe the adrenaline's going up. Maybe the emotions are high. Maybe after he sits with his team and says, hey, you know what? There's still things we could do at 135 pounds. And also, with all these political divisions in boxing, it might take a while for a fight against Gervonta Davis or Teofimo to happen, because we have those are fighters with PBC and Top Rank, respectively. Now, if he stays at 135 pounds and he wants to keep things in-house, there's some unfinished business there. There's a guy named Jojo Diaz. There's a guy named William Cepeda. Those are two interesting fights to be made within the Golden Boy stable that is also realistic, and they're both southpaws, right? Now, if the goal in the future is to have a fight against Gervonta Davis, we're on the right path, because he keeps fighting southpaws, and he's been doing it his whole life because his brother Sean's a southpaw, so we know that he knows how to deal with it. But he's also facing guys like Luke Campbell, Javier Fortuna. These are all southpaw fighters, and then to continue in that rhythm, you got Jojo Diaz and William Cepeda within the same stable. It's a lot tougher. Those fights would be a lot tougher. It would be a step up in opposition, and he can still stay at 135 pounds and make his name there. But also, if the goal is to become a champion at 135, it's going to be difficult there, because you have Devin Haney, and he's going to have, and he's with a different promoter. That's going to be tough to make. So, you can look at it both ways. If he stays at 135 pounds, there's a lot of business to be done. There's a lot of fights that could be made realistically. But if his goal is to become world champion, he could stay at 140 pounds, where 2 belts have already become vacant. The rest are potentially going to become vacant, and he can, achieve his goal, becoming world champion a lot sooner. So I would like to see fights against Jojo Diaz, William Cepeda, even Isaac Cruz. Before moving up to 140. But if he wants to go up to 140, think about what opposition you want to face first. Teofimo Lopez, we don't know how he looks yet. We're going to have to see him in his return fight, how he looks at 140 pounds. And then obviously the fight that we all want to see is the Gervonta Davis fight. And as Davis showed in his fight against Mario Barrios, he can fight at 140 pounds, and he has power at that division.
Yeah, definitely. You make a good point, and I like that. When I kick some of these questions to you, let's be honest. Let's do the promoter side and let's do the fan side, because, obviously sometimes those don't align, and it's difficult to make certain fights. But I would say definitely, if I had to put my money on it, yeah, we'll get a Jojo Diaz fight. And it's not a bad fight by all means. And maybe, they could even make him move up to 140, just if that's what Ryan wants. You know what I mean? Like, hey, yeah, I'll fight you, but, come up to 140, because that's where I want to campaign now. And I think, post-fight, Sean Porter mentioned he thinks that, eventually all of these guys that we're mentioning, the Haneys and all that stuff, Gervonta, 140 is going to be the division. So, like, follow the leader. Like, I'm going to go ahead and do it now. I'll get my feet wet. And, when the time comes that we can actually make these cross-promotional fights, I'll be ready. I'll have been there at least a year or two. And it's tough. I mean, they mentioned Regis Prograis too. A guy that's that guy's the boogeyman, Rougarou. Javier Fortuna was calling himself that, but it's like nobody wants to mention Regis. And he's a beast. Gave Josh Taylor hell and has looked great, ever since. So that's a guy I want to see get a big fight. So obviously it's tough to imagine Ryan Garcia jumping right into that one, but I mean, a hell of a fight on paper too. So, and I know it's one of the ones that was thrown in the graphic a couple times with DAZN. It's like, we're going to throw him in there because he needs to be mentioned, but in reality, we don't think that was going to happen. Sebastian, I see you smiling, so I think you you probably agree with that.
Yeah, completely. He's not ready for that.
Yeah.
At 140 pounds, also, aside from Prograis, you got Jose Ramirez, Jose Cepeda, Honor Barbosa, who just fought. I mean, these are bigger fighters. Even Sandor Martin, these are bigger fighters, tougher opposition. That's why I say when you go up to 140 pounds, get a lay of the land first before you decide on facing some of those top fighters.
Thank you for listening to the RBR Recap. Make sure to follow us on social media at RBR Recap and visit RBRRecap.com for the latest episodes.